once Joe Yabuki gets released, there is one style that is the #1 priority for rework, and that is Slugger. Hey guys, Trify, back again with another video. If you don't know, recently I've been using Slugger and I've come to the realization that this style is a janky, broken mess, and not in the good way. The bottom line is that this style doesn't follow the same rules as any of the other styles in this game, and has made it become one of the most bipolar, hard to balance, hard to enjoy styles in this game. I hate using it, I hate fighting against it, and so does pretty much everyone else, because nothing about it is enjoyable. Pretty much all of it boils down to brute forcing everything, having an M2 that isn't consistent whatsoever and doesn't follow the same rules as any of the other M2s in the game for pretty much zero reason, while also being extremely janky, inconsistent, the hitboxes not making sense, and the style just having so many bugs come up pretty much every update. For example, there's a bug that I think 7 Seconds is probably going to release or has already released that makes it so that you can have no end lag off your M2. So you can immediately confirm an M2 into an M1 consistently. No rollback, no lag, no other jank, the style just being super broken and super janky. I think Drowning Sim knows that too, and as a result, I've been looking through the suggestions of the UBG Discord, and I've come across one suggestion that's particularly appealing. It's made by someone who actually did the Ghost Rework suggestion, along with another balance team member called Eli, and Elysian, who also worked on the Ghost Rework, as I mentioned before. Overall, it's pretty good. It echoes a particular character's abilities, you guys will see very shortly, but the bottom line is, it's very inspired. I do think it can be implemented reasonably as a legendary style, appealing to Takamura as an actual boxer rather than just an archetype that doesn't make sense, while also maintaining the rules and base mechanics of the game that define UG as it is without any jank whatsoever. And yeah, that's pretty much all there is to it. If you guys like the video, you know what to do. Smash the like button, smash the subscribe button, and join the Discord down below. And of course, massive shout out to 7 members of the Trife channel: Cool Guy Flunker, Arlaws, Lil Z, Brownoi, Mercenary, Valerie, and Booby. Let's get straight into it. As I mentioned in the beginning of the video, this Slugger Rework suggestion was made by the following people: Gouda, Eli, and Elysian. 2 balance team members and a random person that makes a lot of suggestions. The description of this Slugger Rework is given as the following: it doesn't matter what advantages Small Fry have over you, because you can do anything. Special ability, Mimicry. You can copy the stats and unique abilities of the style that you're fighting against. It can even master it if used long enough. Unique ability, Rage. Using your ultimate will trigger a rage mode, granting various buffs and nerfs while locking you out of mimicry. Ultimate, Fury of the Almighty. The base stats, so before you use your abilities or any changes to like what you can do, are M1s being Ghost Damage, LF or IF Anti-Heal, or Iron Fist Anti-Heal. Basic Speed, Corkscrew Animations. I do think the animations should still be different compared to other styles in this game. Maybe make them slightly more wild, but still retain the fact that it's boxing and it's simple jabs and hooks and whatnot. But that's what I think in my opinion. Right off the bat though, Ghost Damage with Iron Fist Anti-Heal is kind of insane when you consider Iron Fist's Anti-Heal is pretty good, and Ghost Damage is kind of average or just above average if you really calculate it, which actually makes this style's damage probably around the same level as Basic, which makes it so that it has good damage. And then we look at the M2s, they're also basic, dual-sided, that's pretty good, helps with mix-up, especially with M2 mix, and Slugger Uncharged damage, with a very minor increase in damage to buff it slightly. I don't know if that's necessary. I actually don't know how much damage the Uncharged Slugger M2 does generally. I haven't really compared it to anything else, but I don't think it's that much. I think it's just around the same level as an average M2 when you consider the fact that it has partially regenerable damage. When you get rid of that regenerable damage, it's probably one of the weak M2s in the game, which is pretty fair. But in general, if that's the case, I do think the M2s should just be the same as Basic in terms of damage, maybe around that level. I don't think they should be weaker. That wouldn't make sense to me, especially since Takamura is Takamura. As for the dashes, same as Smash, so you can't really double dash that consistently, if at all, and your block is Basic. That's good. Having a good block as Takamura should be expected. Moving on to the ability, Mimicry. By dealing damage, Slugger fills up a meter. Pressing R with the full meter, so similar to Ghost, Charge, etc., causes Slugger to copy certain aspects of the opponent's style, while receiving some debuffs in exchange. It copies all the traits at once, which are better than its own, which you'll see very shortly. The formula or formulae to calculate mimicry goes as follows. you copy the M1 string amount of your opponent if it's superior in that amount. In return, however, you lose 5% of your damage on string, and lose 50% of your guard damage on string. It should still put Takamura ahead in terms of raw damage, but block damage should be reduced overall. So essentially, you're trading raw damage for block damage. Of course, it does not copy M1 strings fewer than its own, so inferior M1 strings it does not generally copy. It also attempts to copy dashes, but in return has a 10 to 50% stamina and consumption increase and slightly increased dash delay. It does not copy dashes worse than its own, so if you have smash dashes and you copy turtle dashes, you won't copy that trait. You won't nerf your own dashes accidentally when you're trying to adapt to your opponent. As for counter bonuses, you copy 75% of any counter bonus above base, but the debuff is that you suffer from 15% of the counter bonus as increased counter intake. So for example, when you have a 1.5x multiplier and you have 15%, that's a 50% bonus. 15% of that is 7.5%. This would result in a counter weakness multiplier of 1.075x. When it comes to range, it copies the range exactly if the range exceeds its own, but it loses 10% damage on a string. When it comes to the block, it copies the block durability exactly if the block exceeds its own. I think that also includes block regen, so with Corkscrew, it has increased block regen and it will adopt that. However, the debuffs are, your dashes lose some iframes and gain slightly increased delay. The block also takes slightly more damage from M2, so more block durability damage. When it comes to counter resistance, it copies 8% of your opponent's counter resistance if the style they're using has counter resistance. Debuffs, it suffers from 5% decreased damage on startup attacks only. When it comes to M1 speed, it copies M1 speed exactly if the M1 speed exceeds its own. The debuffs are, it suffers from 5% decreased damage on M1 strings. M2s, it copies M2s if its damage exceeds its own, but the debuffs are, anti-heals reduced to 65%. Ooh, that's bad. That's bad. Anyhow, right off the bat, we can see that there's a lot of debuffs that come with these mimicry, using the mimicry ability. So I think this is supposed to be intended as an ability that you may not always use, only use based on the situation. Keep in mind, however, that these debuffs might stack. So in some cases, it might be a game ender for you to copy your opponent's abilities because you might have like 0 damage, 0 dashes, 0 speed, etc. But I think these debuffs aren't intended to stack, and they generally seem too spread out to do so to a point that it might make or break the style for you. Anyhow, when it comes to style-specific debuffs, or buffs, when it comes to the swayback, it copies swayback successfully. Since when did Takamura use the swayback? No, that never happened in the manga. Alright, fair enough. If the opposing style has it, the debuffs are, this swayback suffers from increased end lag, and it cannot be cancelled into dashes. It is not removed with mastery, and has reduced iframes. It is only slightly mitigated with mastery. Switch it has the same mechanic as being able to switch sides on will, so when you're moving to what side. Wolf, the M2s now copy White Fang, both parts. The debuffs are, both parts of the White Fang do heavily decreased block damage. Suffers from all the normal problems White Fang has. The issue with this debuff is that it doesn't really matter because your feints pretty much always land if your opponent falls for them. You can't block that often or that consistently against feints when you're fighting Wolf because the feints are so fast that they catch the period where you can't block from the end of your dash to the point that you block, because there is that gap, and Wolf reliably hits that gap, especially off M1 feints, and therefore their feints often aren't blocked. But when you're coming to terms with an opponent who can block your attacks constantly to read feints and whatnot, and they know how to play the game, they can leverage your worst block damage very, very well to snowball fight into their favor. When it comes to Ghost, it reduces Takamura's highlights, debuffs, slightly reduced dash frames. So it doesn't get the Ghost Chat, maybe? That's curious. As for Freedom, it only copies the current mode. It can only steal Swayback if the Freedom is in Whirlwind mode. Now, does it copy the health? Seems like it retains the 100 health that it already has, so thank God that should remain the case. So in some cases, you pretty much can be Freedom, but with 100 health, which is pretty strong. Particularly, Freedom Flicker mode or Freedom Smash mode with 100 health might be pretty strong, considering the fact that it won't be nerfed in terms of damage in that particular way. Hawk copies base mode statistics only. Well, that's a massive nerf then. Although, as it mentions, it generally won't directly nerf your stats if, like, the Hawk's abilities, for example, are generally worse. Copy lasts until a set amount of damage is dealt to Takamura, at which point his stats revert to base. Damage reduction from copy is capped at 10%. Iframe reduction from copy may not make the dashes worse than the worst dash in the game. Stamina consumption may not be increased more than 15%. So it does have caps that address, you know, that these damage reductions and nerfs can stack, and we want to put a limit on that. By dealing 40 damage in a copy mode, or in copy mode, Takamura can permanently remove a random set of debuffs from one of his copied attributes. Progress to master abilities can carry over between copies, and mastery can be gained multiple times. That is very cool. I like that a lot. It feeds into the idea of slowly adapting as Takamura, because Takamura can do anything, but you have to earn it, you have to work for it. It plays the long game. So in the end game, it's expected that you're very, very strong, and you know exactly what to do, and you're prepped to win the match. Now, for the ultimate, Gouda's note, so one of the people making the suggestion, noted that he's trying to do something new here, and there's a good chance that this is either really good or really underpowered. That pretty much applies to every new idea. In existence for any fighting game. So don't worry, you don't need to apologize. This is expected. This is the process of making new things, of bringing new ideas to the table, and making things better. Using Takamura's ultimate allows him to enter rage mode, which costs 50% of his ult, and lasts until Takamura is knocked down. If knocked down while in rage mode, Takamura's ult is set to 50% if he was knocked down by an ultimate, or is set to 0% otherwise. That's pretty insane. When it comes to the stats of rage mode, so the actual Slugger mode, current Slugger M1, so right off the bat, insane damage. Hanslow block, I think that's a block buff because I believe Slugger's block is even worse than Hanslow. Smash dashes, expected, with basic delay, no, and increased stamina. Okay, increased stamina consumption. Basic dash is actually pretty good, I don't agree with that. Gets 4 dashes before stamina break. Again, fine, but like, you're not really dashing more than once or twice in interaction, so this doesn't really make sense. Corkscrew M2 damage, basic speed, cannot be charged. Finally! I don't know why charged M2s or M2 delay exists in this game. We don't need that. M2s and M1s should be consistent. The variable part should be the feints. That's how it should work. Especially with how jank it is and how insane it can be in the right hands. It's even chargeable on M1 feints. Get rid of the charge mechanic. Slugger doesn't need it and shouldn't have it, and it breaks the game and it makes it so it's horrible to use and horrible to fight against. Anyhow, increased counter intake, expected. Slightly increased ultimate gain from dealing damage, same as it is now. In fact, I think quite an increase compared to other styles in this game. And reduced stamina consumption on feints. Using the ultimate again, you need to get 100% ult again to use it. In rage mode, uses a proper ultimate. Now the question is, can you get 100% ult and just use the ultimate instead? Can you make that an option? I feel like that would be more fair. That's my opinion though. In rage mode, using a proper ultimate, as I just mentioned, at which point rage mode immediately ends. It does 60%, so that's pretty insane, but expected from Takamura, and has increased guard damage. Is that on top of the block damage that ults generally do ever since the ult block buff, or block damage buff, where they can actually break blocks in general? If that's the case, that might be way too strong, because it kind of forces people to take a crap ton of damage every time Slugger lands a hit, which might be insane. For the ultimate animation, for those of you that care, your screen turns red and you go into a brutal beatdown of the opponent, which is interspersed, that's a new word, with an animation of your coach chosen from your friends list holding a set of mitts in front of you, that's pretty cool, and you hitting them. This ends with a right straight which flashes between you hitting the mitts and the opponent. That is actually a really cool reference to the end of the David Eagle fight between Takamura and David Eagle, where Takamura got his second championship title, or world championship title. Of course, credits to Elysian and Eli or Elijah, the other balance team member, and finally Gouda for this suggestion. Overall, pretty good suggestion, but if I'm going to be real with you, this is literally just Yuto Kotsu from JJK. I'm going to make the same reference here. This is another JJK reference, and Gouda knew it himself because he says in the suggestion, when I took a look at it, not to call it Yuto Kotsu. But I'm going to make the reference because it's pretty obvious what this is. I know where you got this inspiration from, and I just gotta bring it up. On that note, with this rework, and look, I expect this for the Slugger rework as a whole, with considering Slugger as is isn't Takamura. This style isn't a Slugger style. This is no longer Slugger. What this is Takamura. Fuck Slugger, fuck the name. I'm not going to uncensor those F words. What we need to do is we need to rename Slugger to Takamura. The same way we have Ippo as Ippo, because he is the GOAT with Ippo. He is one of the main characters. He is one of the people that we are most hyped for and legends that we look up to, despite how much of a bad person he is, which is a whole separate thing if you guys have read the manga. Nevertheless, any rework that comes around for the Slugger style, I expect it should be done so that it isn't a Slugger style. It's not all about slugging and brawling. It's different. It's more substantial than that. It's about the fact that Takamura can do anything and is an adaptability monster. And yeah, that's pretty much all there is to it. I hope you guys liked the suggestion. Check it out in the UBG suggestions channel in the UBG Discord. And yeah, I'll catch you guys in the next one. See ya.